Hey guys, and welcome to one of our tutorials, this one being about how I want you to set up your data spreadsheets for your flipped classroom. So I talked about this in one of our lessons, and I want to provide for you a little more detail on how to set it up. I may have done that good enough for you in the lesson, but this one just is, I'm hoping to really lay it out for you a little bit better. So let's go ahead and get started. So what you do is you'll pull up from your PDF guide this link. This link is a template, so Flipped Classroom Formative Data Master Spreadsheet Template for Flipped Classroom Formula. It's the longest title ever. But go ahead, it'll force you to make a copy. If you have issues doing that, please just send me an email and we can get that straightened out for you. So what I recommend doing is going to your online gradebook. And what I did in Progress Book is I would run a report, and that report would be a class roster, and then I would just copy down the length on the left-hand side, right, which is all the students' names, and I would just plug them in here. Now, I'm kind of like pretty particular about my spreadsheet, so I type in all of their names so that, you know, it's just what I do. But anyway, so the first thing, absolute first thing that you're going to want to do is go down to the bottom here where you have your tab, and you'll click on the little drop down arrow and you'll click duplicate. And what you'll see is it just made a copy of bell number. So let's say that you have 2 sections of AP Psychology or 2 sections of Algebra 1, whatever that looks like for you. So what you'll do is click on each of the tabs, click the drop down arrow, and click rename. And so you can put Bell 1 if you want to, or Algebra Bell 1, or however you want to name those so that it's super simple for you to see, okay, this is how I've set up my classes. So that's the absolute first thing, is you want to duplicate that. And then what you'll want to do is go through and put all your students' names in like we talked about. And really that's pretty much it. Now, here's the thing. This is a template, right? So you want to set this up to really work for you. So we've talked about getting your bells in there and your students' names and all that jazz, but this might not work for you as far as like the units and stuff go. So another big thing you want to do to set up your spreadsheet is to figure out, okay, what formative assessments am I going to use, and then what am I going to name those? So if you notice in these cells here where I say 1, 2, 3, 4, I just made that really generic for like formative assessment 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that may not work for you because you're going to be thinking to yourself, well, which one's 2 and which one's 3 and which one's 4? Like in my class, number 1 would be Intro to Psychology quiz, or the Perspectives quiz is what I called it. Well, calling it number 1 doesn't service me in any way. Like that doesn't help me. So you might want to come up with like some kind of naming convention that helps you, just so that you can see, okay, which one is which. I will say, however, that once you have the data in there, you don't absolutely need to like see which formative assessment it was, outside of knowing, well, in that unit, here's how you did on your formative assessments. So coming up with a naming convention there would probably be helpful. Or even if you wanted to like highlight those and shrink the text as small as it will go, which is 6, and then you can type in the names of your quizzes if that's helpful. Let me remind you really quickly of these functions that I have, and then in the next tutorial I'm going to talk to you about how I set those up so that when you go to use your spreadsheet throughout the year, you know how to do that. So these are averages. So in each of these rows, and I'll go ahead and add those there, each of these, the last like row or column, I'm sorry, of each section is the average column. So what I did here was just say, okay, for this student, let's say it's Sally Joe, right? All 4 of her formative assessments here will equate into or be used in the formula to average out in that cell there. So that you have that for every single unit. But then if you scroll down, you'll see that I have averages for the overall formative assessment, which is kind of like a number for you, right? So in formative assessment 1, you'll just see that I highlighted each of these cells here underneath that first formative assessment and then put the formula in for an average there. So that's what those formulas are. You'll see that if I plug in some numbers here, that it averages it there. But then if I plug in some numbers here, that if I scroll down, it averages it down at the bottom here as well. Now let's talk about that summative test data spreadsheet and how to get that set up for your year. So in that same PDF guide, what you want to do is find the other link to the summative test data spreadsheet, that template. And again, it will force you to make a copy. So go ahead and title it however is going to be helpful for you, so that you can find that in your Google Drive easily and aren't making multiple copies that are new files. That's not good. You want to stick to the one that you're going to use for the whole year. Let me kind of explain what I have here so that you can kind of see how I used and why I set it up this way in my classroom. So again, you'll just like copy and paste in your students' names here. I had one of these tabs for each of my bells, just like in the formative assessment spreadsheet. So again, you'll click the drop down arrow in the tab, duplicate and rename it for the bell, plug in all your students' names. You know this already. But what I did at the beginning of the year is surveyed my students to ask them, are you planning on taking the AP test? Now, something new College Board is going to be doing is requiring students to register for their test early on in the year. So you'll know very early on, like October, I think, maybe even September, that students are going to be taking the AP exam. And so I would just indicate a Y or an N here for yes or no. And that is not included in their average column over here. And then I have a column for the test prep book. I gave extra credit, not all years, but some years I gave extra credit for students to get one of those 5 Steps to a 5 or Barron's books that were those preparatory books. And I just clicked or entered a Y or an N for that, just because it was informative information for me to know, do they have that or not? And then the unit numbers up here, blah, blah, blah. These you're going to want to kind of redo to make them work for you. Just so you know, I'm going to show you how to do this in the next video, but let's say that you insert a column and you want to title it here. This is one thing that I don't love about Google Spreadsheets is you can't change the direction of the text. So if you're going to put in another unit, you would actually have to do U and then Command or Control Enter for each letter. And that was like, see, I just messed it up because it's like so counterintuitive. Command Enter T, Command Enter Enter, and then like the number, right? Like, that is just super annoying and I don't like it, but it's the way that I can make it visible all in like without all of the scrolling, right? So that's just how I do it. So you'll want to get in there and rename each of your unit columns, however you're going to do those. I did include columns for the exams, meaning like each quarter I gave a cumulative exam of the date or of the content we had covered thus far. So if you don't do that, just get rid of those. And then over here, you'll see after what would be Unit 9 now, what was my last unit, which was Unit 14, I have a practice because I gave them a full practice test. Now, that normally was not for A grade, but I still entered that percentage there. And that's really important too to know is that in each of these cells, you want to be sure that you are entering the percentage. That seems kind of self-explanatory, like duh, and I hope that that's the way it is for you, but if it's not, that's okay, because we think, oh, I've got to enter the points because that's how I do it on my grade book. That's not true. You want to be entering your percentages here, because it's just one less formula you have to enter into all these cells, which to me just makes it a little more confusing. And then that last column was like, I would retroactively go back through and enter their AP exam score, and I would just do the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, obviously. That's all we have. But it was just kind of helpful for me to compare that data to their summative assessment data as well. And that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, please let me know. But this is about essentially setting up your mastered spreadsheet for your formative assessments for the school year in your flipped classroom. I hope that was helpful, and everybody have a good one.